I'll go ahead and get this started. For our viewers out there, my name is Thomas. I'm with ForReel Movie News and Reviews here in Bellingham. And I am on the line with Quinn Armstrong and Vayu O'Donnall to talk about their film that just had their international premiere at the Fantasia Film Festival called Survival Skills. I want to start off by saying I was a big fan of this movie. It's so unique, but it's so funny, but it also is very serious at the same time. I think that there's a lot to take away from the film, and I'm really excited to have a discussion with you guys about it.
Nice.
Why don't you guys introduce introduce yourselves really quick in your part in the film, I guess, because Quinn, you're the director, Vayu, you're the lead actor.
Mm-hmm. I'm this voice is Quinn. I am the writer and director.
Writer and director, perfect.
This voice is Vayu, and I am the actor who plays Jim.
Yeah, very awesome. So Quinn, can you, just for everyone to understand what this movie is about, can you kind of give us a quick synopsis of what Survival Skills is and what the premise is for this film?
Yeah, I've gotten so good at this because we have to do this a lot. So Survival Skills is the story of a rookie police officer who gets in over his head when he tries to resolve a domestic violence case outside the law. The thing about it is that it is almost entirely presented as a mid-'80s police training video with, like, you know, a narrator and, you know, little infographics that pop up. The narrator, incidentally, played by Stacy Keach, who is phenomenal and so scary as a human. And it's a throwback to a lot of movies that genuinely existed, but with a little more of a serious twist to it.
I do like how well you balance the funny aspects of it with the serious aspects of it, because ultimately this movie covers a very, very heavy topic, which is domestic violence, and how this rookie officer through this training video kind of has to deal with the personal struggle with the professional struggle of helping people, and the problems that ensue because of that. Can you talk a little bit more about the inspiration of where this premise came from and what made you decide to put this story on film?
Sure. So the main thing is I worked for a number of years, both professionally and as a volunteer, in domestic violence shelters, and worked with programs like DART down in Los Angeles, which is the Domestic Abuse Response Team, which basically means you go with the police officers to domestic abuse calls, and you're there to sort of like just be with the survivor and connect with them. And during that time, I encountered a lot of rules and a lot of situations that felt very counterintuitive when it was very obvious that someone was maybe being abused, but there's nothing we could do about it, because if they're not willing to testify, if they're financially dependent on their abuser, there's a million things like that, a million situations where people might be unable to just simply do what we all want to do, which is say, okay, this person is clearly being hurt. Let's get them out of this situation. Let's support them and prevent the abuser from doing this again. So that's sort of the underlying thing. And then on top of that, I kind of ran into this wealth of these bizarre training videos from the 80s. And they're all so specific to their time, because this is like Reagan era stuff, you know. This is like very alarmist, paranoid, xenophobic, racist, sexist, homophobic, the whole, you know, the gamut, anything you want it to be. They are just awful. And I liked it because they're funny. You watch them and you're like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. This is, you know, like these little low budget mini movies by people who were like thinking they're serious directors and stuff like that. But underneath them, there's this really dark undercurrent that seemed to fit well with the idea of like, okay, no, let's talk about domestic violence. Like, let's get into this for real. So it was sort of the fusion of those two ideas that were interesting originally.
For sure, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, Vayu, I'm gonna come to you because in talking about the balance between comedy and seriousness in this movie, obviously, Vayu, as the lead actor, you are kind of the one that facilitates that. And I know watching this film, there are a couple moments when it's just so, there's such emotional scenes, and it has to do with you and your performance in this role. Can you tell me more about how you felt about this role, how you connected with it, and what was it that made you fit so perfectly, I think, in portraying this character?
Well, I'm basically a very wooden actor as it is, and I'm just, no, I'm kidding. So I think that, you know, I first, the way that Quinn and I actually met was I saw a listing on just like a site that was a casting site for a short. And in reading the description, I was already kind of interested in it. And then after auditioning and working with the material, I got to read some more of the material, and I just saw how really well written it was and how interesting it would be to play. And then after doing the short, Quinn and I kind of talked and collaborated. We collaborated really well, and we ended up, you know, talking about doing the feature and just who this character was and where it was coming from. And we went back and forth for months trying to figure out, does this character has a backstory? Should we take aspects of this? How do we deal with this character's seeming lack of societal awareness, or, you know, societal cues, or how can this person be 30 years old and know so little? And the thing that we finally kind of found was that it would be better for the whole piece if the character was in a way created for the piece, so that there was no past, right? And in doing that, we really wanted to focus on this journey of innocence to experience. And so I think a lot of the comedy, to come back to your original question, comes from this earnest, open-hearted, well-intentioned optimist that has very little understanding of the harshness of the world around him. So the comedy actually comes out in a grounded way. It's not really being played at. It's coming from the fact that you see this jaded cop that Ericka Kreutz plays so well in the partner Allison, butt up against this absolute, you know, gleaming white optimist, you know what I mean? Just like a symbol of purity. And the disconnect, I think, causes the comedy, you know. And also having Stacy Keach is this kind of grounded, gravelly, you know, voice of the law and order, you know, in opposition to my character, which was kind of like light and floaty and and always seeing the brighter side of things. I think that just created comedy.
You're right, because what the movie does is it takes this character who has that, you know, that super high optimism about the world, and is kind of a part of this training video. He's supposed to be a little robotic, right? And plopping him into the natural world and the normal world. And I think that kind of dynamic where he's kind of new and fresh to the world, but everyone else understands the social cues, like you're saying, does create that kind of subtle comedy that happens in the film.
But you're also, as an audience member, allowed to, through Jim, you're allowed to see the world in an optimistic way, and then you also feel the foreboding of him. Just you see like he's going to get hurt, he's going to get crushed, and you start to empathize with this character out of his I don't know, immaturity or his earnesty, right? So I think it's a really interesting way to kind of find a way into this piece.
Right. Yeah. His naivety ultimately, because
Exactly.
he does have this optimism that doesn't really exist in real life. Like things don't play out the way that he expects. And it's unfortunate because he does have the greatest intentions and he is trying to do the right thing all the time. So it is interesting to watch his perspective play out us knowing the social cues and us knowing the reality of how things usually play out, but him not really getting it, but finding out along the way. I do want to know, and what was the most difficult part I think, because you guys mentioned this was a short and then it was adapted to a feature length. What was the most difficult part about this production for you guys?
I'll go first, because what Quinn will say, I mean, he had so much more to think about, but we did it in a truncated amount of time, and we shot based on location, and so everything was shot out of order. So the challenge that I felt was finding that degradation over time of the character, meaning how his optimism and his enthusiasm started to crack and dwindle. And so you're really able to track that arc over the course of the film, because we shot it out of sequence. So there was a constant conversation that Quinn and I had almost before every take or every scene. Where is he in, is he from a 1 to 10, where do we find his level of affect? And then oftentimes we would shoot something a little more heightened, and then something a little bit more realistic, and then kind of hit the center as well. And just to be able to give Quinn and our amazing editor, Kira Burton, some room to play within that as well. That was the toughest part for me, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was definitely a challenge. I think for me, the hardest thing is that we're mimicking a style that is extremely clunky and purposefully very stilted, and so you can't have good ideas in certain respects. Like, you can't stage a scene, quote unquote, well, and you can't shoot beautiful images the way you want to. You have to, if you're gonna do a cool, clever trick with the camera or something, you have to disguise it. You have to bury it, because any elegant solution to the sort of problems that you face that every production faces would stick out like a sore thumb. And it was frustrating, I think, for me, and frustrating for our DP, Ali Schultz, who did an amazing job working within very tight constraints, to not fall back on our instincts, and to have to really be slavishly devoted to the style, so that the things that needed to be heard in the story could be heard. So we're controlling what changes over time, so that, because the important thing is Jim's journey. That's all the thematic stuff will take care of itself. Jim, we just have to get out of the way, essentially. But it was tough to sort of be like, oh, we could do this, and then be like, no, we can't do any of that cool stuff. We have to do the not cool stuff. They have to sit across from each other, and we have to be over their shoulder on one, over their shoulder on the other, and then a master shot, and then we're out.
But sometimes those like really simplistic elements actually work really well. I'm thinking about the scene where he is talking with the stepdaughter and interviewing her about the abuse that was going on. And I remember how long the take is when they first start the conversation. There is a point where it breaks the shot, reverse shot, but I enjoyed, obviously the content of that scene is disturbing, but just from a filmmaking perspective, I enjoyed how that scene was composed. And it's nothing super fancy, and it works with the style and the story that's being told there. But I did want
Thomas, you just made Quinn really happy, because that was one of his favorite scenes, and he was always worried that it was so long. But you just made him very happy.
Yes, that was okay, great. Yes, Quinn, I love that scene and how it was composed. But the style is something that I did want to ask about. Was how much discussion was there about keeping that 80s style for the whole, or at least the majority of the film? Because I know, as a viewer who's coming into this movie not really knowing a whole lot about it, and it starts off with this 80s kind of VHS old school looking thing, and I'm like, man, I don't know how I feel about the style. I think for anyone who does want to watch it, you get used to it, and obviously the story kind of supersedes the the kind of old schoolness of the style. But was there ever a concern that that might get in the way of the story, or that might distract from the story you guys are telling?
Yes, but in kind of a different way. I think Vayu, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you do Shakespeare on stage, you got like 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning where people are getting used to it. People are learning how to listen to it and how to watch it, because it's really hard to grasp. And then they start to get it. And I think there's like the bar for admission for Shakespeare is much higher than it is for like watching a VHS, you know? Mm-hmm. So I think the main thing was I was much more concerned about people finding false notes in the first 10 minutes, because if in the first 10 minutes we're not really convincing that this is a VHS, then the entire movie could become a game of spot the inaccuracies. And the audience could just be sitting there, especially the sort of like cinephile audiences, the older folks who've been VHS can just be sitting there and being like, well, that's not how it is. That's not how it is. Which is why we couldn't ever use digital filters. We had to use accurate like analog VCRs to create the effect, because otherwise it's just, you can't sit with something that long and have it be wrong. It has to be real accurate. And people will forgive a lot in the first 10 minutes. 10 minutes is a pretty forgiving amount of time. So as long as we get people involved in the first 10 minutes, then, and we have, the movie opens with Stacy Keach. We are playing our strongest card pretty much immediately in terms of like direct impact. And then we get them involved in Jim's journey, which, Vayu does such an incredible job bringing people into. That was honestly the biggest thing I was worried about. Before Vayu auditioned and before I met Vayu, I was really worried. I was like, no one's going to watch this movie about this robot man going through all this. But I think Vayu does such an amazing job in teasing out just these little sort of tantalizing hints of complexity and humanity until it overbalances and overwhelms the kind of roboticness, and you get that degradation that we talked about.
Yeah, Vayu, how was that experience for you? Like being this robotic character, like was there anything that you got out of playing this role or kind of being this character for the short and the feature-length film?
Well, I think that as an actor, there are characters that you just fall in love with, right? And I've had a couple in my career, and Jim's definitely one of them. Just being able to have a childlike experience where everything is new, everything's exciting. I have a child now, and watching her take in the world kind of feels how I was as Jim, trying to take in everything as new, and kind of it's like being in an appreciation mode all the time. And the interesting thing was, it's also very painful too, because if you take off all of your filters, then when he goes to that first domestic violence scene, it's like things are attacking him and he's not sure how to handle them, so he feels very discombobulated. And I think it was just getting to a very blank slate, vulnerable place, and allowing the world to kind of attack me and inspire me. And I fell in love with the character out of his earnestness and his sensitivity to the world.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. I don't know, Vayu, I think we've talked about this. I don't know if you know this, but in the very, very early stages of this project, when we were talking about it, I was going to play Jim. And it is really, really good that I didn't, because in my head, Jim was much colder and much sort of like, not in my head, but when I did it, Jim was a much more sort of like intellectual presence. And I think what you managed to do, that whole like the childlike wonder and the sort of charisma of Jim is entirely yours. That's, you know, that is not something that I originally even saw until you walked into the audition room. And then I thought, oh, this is not a robot. This is a child. And it really makes the movie, I think, that difference.
I think so, because I think that children, they know right and wrong. They can kind of sense when something is right and when something is wrong, and when someone is dangerous or when someone is amiable. And so Jim kind of has that same sensitivities to the world. And that's why when the world doesn't reflect what he's feeling, it creates the drama that we get to watch and understand, and then also the anticipation of how it's going to play out. It's almost like, in a way, it's almost like American Beauty, right? I'm going to die at the end of this film, or something like. It's like you almost see he's destined to have a miserable experience down the line, but you just get to watch it play out, and the interesting part is how it plays out.
And guys, I love this discussion. This is really cool. Just hearing you guys talk about this character, it's so much to unpack with him. So thank you for that. That's great. I do want to ask, because this movie, even though it's mostly about Jim's journey and about domestic violence, it's interesting the timing of the movie coming out during the current social issues that we have going on in the country. I do wonder, what place do you guys think this movie has in the current situations that Americans are in or feeling about when it comes to police and social or social injustice, police brutality, BLM? Like, where does this movie fit in that whole scheme of issues going on right now?
Well, I think I'm sort of split on this. Because on the one hand, we've gotten a lot of press at Fantasia that seems to have really gotten what we're going for, as this is in part a deconstruction and an attack on some of the fundamentals of what a police person is and how they're trained and all that sort of thing. And I do think I think because it was made earlier, it emerges as kind of a more nuanced voice than it would, like, if we were making this now, it would be a very different movie, because I'm aware of how naive this is, but I was genuinely pretty shocked by some of the things that have happened in the last 3 or 4 months. Because I assumed if something like this would happen, a major sort of wave of resentment against the police and that sort of thing, I assumed that the police would sort of behave how most cultural institutions do, where they would say, you know what, we're sorry, you're right, we're going to change, and then just not change. I was shocked. I was in the autonomous zone in Seattle for a while. I saw a police officer shoot a stun grenade at a 23-year-old girl. Her heart stopped. She was only revived by the medics that were at the autonomous zone, not police medics, like our people. So on the one hand, I have this sort of sense of regret at being like, I wish we had thrown, a few grenades of our own in the movie, because it's not nearly as brutal as it could be towards the police. And in one really particular respect, because if we were making this now, I think likely one of the things that I would have done is the abusive husband, Mark, would be a cop, which I considered early on, and I thought, that unbalances the movie. It makes it this thing about revenge where I'm really interested in deconstructing the systems, not the people. But you know, on the one hand, yes, I wish it were more aggressive. I wish it were dealing more with the overt violence of the system. But on the other hand, I'm glad it's out there talking about the some of the more hidden systemic issues in how the police are organized, how they're trained, and all that sort of thing. Because it is about, you know, a quote unquote good cop, and how even a good cop can't really be a good cop. But yeah, I mean,
Right.
I'm still processing my
Right, and
thoughts about all this.
absolutely, because I think that you are right. The film does a really great job at staying focused on what you're trying to get across, which is important because if you try throwing too much in, without it being relevant to your story, or if you're just trying to make a point, like it can get unbalanced, kind of like you were saying. And so I do think that the way that the movie plays out right now and how you have it is great, and I love the final product that you guys put together. But it is interesting kind of analyzing how, the time that is coming out, and the situations we're dealing with as a country with police and the public. So yeah, there is a lot to deconstruct there, and hopefully those issues get addressed. But I'm glad that people are taking your movie the way that it was meant to be taken, and that it's getting positive reception. Certainly for me, I was a very big fan of it.
I was terrified when we found out we were going to Fantasia and all this was happening. I was like, oh my God, people are gonna think that I made this like propaganda movie and this thing that is pro cop. And I genuinely called one of my producers and was like, we have to pull the movie from the festival. We have to like leave the festival. We can't like, and thankfully everybody calmed me down and was like, it's fine. People will get it. And they,
I think in a way, and again, yes, there have been reviews that kind of say you're not speaking to the moment. Well, when you're making something 2 years in the past, it's hard to speak to the moment. And, so obviously there are some disconnects there. But in viewing the film again recently, I've seen it about 4 or 5 times now, I was surprised at how there are certain parts that do actually connect in a really strong way. There are things about the system being broken, and there are things about the officers not having all of the tools and things that they should have if they're going to approach a domestic violence case. And so some things are still unearthed by this investigation, however, it may not be timely at this point. It still does do some of the work,
Yeah, and those are legitimate, questions and criticisms
Totally.
have about the movie. I totally get it, but I also think we are occupying the space we occupy. A couple of the actually no, not a couple. One, I'm petty enough that I'm keeping track of individual reviews. One of the reviews sort of dinged us and said, it doesn't really go that far into examining race, because this is a 1980s like America through Reagan's eyes, so it is massively predominantly white. And on the one hand, totally, that's a totally fair point to make, and it is an issue in the movie. On the other hand, I don't know. I don't have the authority to really talk about that in depth. We deal with it a little bit when we talk about Jim's partner, Jenny, played by Tyra Collar, who is phenomenal. But I don't know that I have the position and the authority to be like, all right, I'm gonna talk about what it feels like to deal with the police when you're Black in America. That would be a very stupid thing for me to do because I have no idea. So it's sort of, I totally get it. And I think those are fair criticisms to make across the board. But I think the movie is occupying the space that that I personally, as you know, as a creator, feel comfortable talking about and feel like I have the authority to talk about. I can talk about the domestic violence system and the way survivors move through it because I know. But there are some other things I just don't. And, you know, it's on me to do research and to understand and that sort of thing. But it's, yeah, and, you know, you're not going to hit them all.
Absolutely. And I think that those are fair points. I like the self-analysis there and the honesty that you bring towards, you know, analyzing those reviews and critiques of your work, because I'm sure that's not easy to do as a creator. So great work there. So we're coming up on, I think we passed half an hour, so I'll go ahead and wrap it up. I guess what I really want to know now is what's the future for this film? You know, Fantasia is the international debut of it. Do you guys have other film festivals lined up for it? Do you have a distributor? Like, what's the plan next for Survival Skills?
So we have, we're going to be going to the Horrible Imaginings Festival in Santa Ana. That starts September 1st. That's a cool little genre festival down there. We've got the Indie Street Festival. I'm looking at my whiteboard that has the things. The Indie Street Festival in New Jersey, which starts on the 18th. There are a couple big international fests. We have our European premiere at the end of October, which I can't fully talk about. And we're again, I can't really say anything, but you know, it will be released into the wild before too long.
Fair enough.
It's coming soon.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm really excited for that time when it does get released into the wild and people, and I can share it with people because I think it is a great film. I think you guys did really great work with it. I was very happy to watch it. I've watched it a couple times now, and enjoyed it more every time I've watched it. So really great work, guys. Yeah, absolutely. Really great work. I'm excited to recommend it to people. So, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do this interview.
Did I lose you? I think we lost you. You're mute.
So
Great.
I guess
after the is there anything else you guys? Sorry, I got a call. It's one of the things in technology.
It's all right.
Is there anything that you guys want to say to wrap this up? Any last thoughts that you guys want to put out there to people who might be watching?
Be kind to each other in this trial.
When you watch the film, see if you can find out where Jim is extremely cold during the filming of it.
Also, yeah, speaking of that, definitely watch out for that because it's more than once. I'm so sorry about it. Count the crosses. Find the crosses. That'll help.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll unlock like a little thing for you. It's not a big Easter egg, but find the crosses.
Interesting. I have to go back and watch it.
Oh yeah, no, I have to go back and watch it. Give me another reason to watch it. That's fine. Oh man, well, Quinn and Vayu, thank you so much for this time, for taking out the time to talk with me and talk more about this film. I'm excited to get my review up and post our interview. And good luck with the rest of this film's journey. I really hope that it continues getting positive reviews and great feedback, and that it has a very successful life in the film world.
Thank you, Thomas. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely, guys.
Stay in touch. I'm not far from you. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to work in the area.
Yeah.
Up here. So. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I'm really happy to come across local filmmakers. So that's awesome. All right, guys. I will sign off. Thank you again, and have a great day. All right.
Thanks, Tom.
All right.